Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive cultural and corporate earthquake. We're going to explore how Generation Z is radically transforming the landscape of compensation, shifting it from this closed-door, heavily guarded secret to a fully transparent, heavily regulated baseline. Honestly, if you hire, manage, or work alongside this generation, this shift impacts you directly. We're going to look at the data, the psychology, and the new laws driving this massive change. Let's get right into it. Before we dive into the roadmap, I want you to think about what's basically been the ultimate social taboo. Imagine this. Would you ever post your exact salary online for literally the whole world to see? For previous generations, the answer was a resounding no way. But for the newest entrants to the workforce, the answer is increasingly, well, why wouldn't I? Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start by breaking down the salary taboo, dive into the psychology of pay, look at exactly what Gen Z expects, map out the transparency law boom, and finally wrap up with the employer playbook to help you handle it all. All right, Section 1, breaking the salary taboo, the end of secret paychecks. So we're seeing this massive cultural movement led by Gen Z right now, and it's called loud budgeting. You know that private, hidden financial anxiety people used to have? Well, young adults are taking that and making it a completely public, totally transparent conversation. They're openly sharing their spending limits and financial goals online for everyone to see. It's a direct response to economic uncertainty and a powerful desire to actually take ownership of their financial realities.
And this demand for transparency, it's spilling directly into the professional world. If you look at platforms like TikTok, the hashtag career talk has absolutely exploded with over 155,000 posts. Job seekers aren't just complaining anymore. They're sharing real industry data and exact salary benchmarks. This transparency is practically a survival tactic against high living costs, rent hikes, and the deep frustration of applying to opaque ghost jobs. It's completely changing how candidates benchmark their expectations, moving them from just passively waiting for an offer to proactively kicking off negotiations on their own terms.
Moving right along to Section 2, the psychology of pay beyond the paycheck. To really make sense of this, we need to look at organizational psychology, specifically Herzberg's two-factor theory. Decades ago, Herzberg called salary a hygiene factor. Basically, pay is a critical baseline, a threshold you absolutely must hit just to stop people from actively hating their jobs or disengaging. But here's the thing, just paying well doesn't guarantee long-term loyalty. Once that financial baseline is cleared, true motivators like a sense of purpose, career growth, and recognition are what actually drive sustained long-term engagement. Now, Gen Z has taken this baseline a huge step further. They've extended the concept through something researchers call the psychological contract. It's basically the unwritten mutual expectations between an employee and an employer. For this digitally native generation, pay transparency isn't just about the dollar amount anymore. It's viewed as this vital, unwritten signal of an employer's overall fairness, equity, and trustworthiness. So here's the kicker. If an employer refuses to disclose a salary range, it immediately signals a breach in that unwritten contract. It whispers to the candidate, hey, we might not play fair behind closed doors. And the result? Nearly 50% of Gen Z college grads say they'd simply walk away from the hiring process entirely if pay isn't transparent. Think about that. If you're an employer hiding your budget, you are literally losing half your talent pool before you even get a chance to make an offer. Okay, Section 3, what Gen Z expects, the data behind the demands. When you actually survey these younger workers about what they think a high starting salary is, the average response comes out to $82,000. I know there are a lot of headlines out there about entitled demands, but this generation really isn't out of touch with reality. In fact, 2/3 of respondents placed their definition of a high starting salary well below the six-figure mark, meaning they're anchoring their expectations in highly pragmatic, real-world economics. But there is a super sobering statistic buried in this data that we really need to pause on. A stark gender pay gap actually persists in expectations before these careers even start. On average, women expect $6,200 less than guys do for a starting salary. This highlights exactly why systemic pay transparency is so absolutely crucial. It levels the playing field before historical biases can take root in a whole new generation's earning potential. Looking at the bigger picture, This entry-level workforce is fundamentally craving security. When asked what makes them hit that apply button, 85% cited job stability, 81% said benefits, and 80% pointed to a high starting salary. They are highly pragmatic, and they're intensely focused on securing their foundational economic needs first before looking at anything else. Which brings us to Section 4, the Transparency Law. Boom. Legislation forcing change. Nationwide, we're seeing a massive expansion of salary data and job postings, driven by both new laws and just, intense market competition. There are now 1.3 times as many full-time jobs showing salary data on the Handshake network compared to 2020. Employers are quickly realizing a very hard truth. If they don't post the pay, they simply don't get the applicants. And for the companies dragging their feet, the consequences are getting steep. These new pay transparency laws have serious financial teeth. States like California and Colorado are now authorized to slap businesses with massive fines, up to $10,000 for a single violation. Non-compliance is no longer just a recruiting disadvantage. It's a massive financial liability that can seriously wreck your bottom line. By 2026, we're looking at a wild patchwork of 18 states plus Washington, D.C. that have enacted transparency laws. And here's what's absolutely crucial to understand. If you hire remote workers, you are generally subject to the strictest laws of whatever state that employee happens to sit in. On top of that, over 20 states have straight up banned employers from asking candidates about their salary history to stop compounding past wage inequities. Honestly, multi-state compliance has become incredibly complex, requiring a total operational overhaul for HR departments nationwide. Finally, Section 5, the Employer Playbook, turning compliance into advantage. To see how you can actually do this right, we can look at an amazing case study from Arago Consulting. They worked with a 600-employee company spread across multiple countries. This organization was dealing with chaotic, fragmented pay structures left over from old mergers, significant gender pay gaps, and massive inconsistencies caused by managers just kind of doing their own thing. They needed to adapt to incoming transparency directives fast, and they needed a system that actually worked. So they executed a highly structured 3-step playbook to fix the mess. Step 1, auditing their data to map job grades so they could actually compare apples to apples. Step 2, building a unified, defensible compensation grid backed by real market benchmarks. And step 3, which is so often forgotten, they intensely trained their managers on how to actually communicate these changes and answer sensitive questions using developed scripts. Because, transparency only works if your team knows how to talk about it effectively. And we're seeing similar strategic adaptations happening all over the globe. Take the Indian IT sector, for example. Historically, they've been plagued by a brutal 25% attrition rate, but we're seeing estimates drop to around 11.8%. How? Well, research shows that once companies clear that baseline hygiene threshold of fair, transparent pay, something fascinating happens. 57% of Indian Gen Z respondents start defining career growth as skill acquisition rather than just endless salary hikes. Once the money's fair and on the table, keeping people relies on non-monetary levers like aggressive upskilling and flexible hybrid work. Ultimately, when you execute it correctly, radical transparency does way more than just keep you out of legal trouble. As Arago Consulting pointed out, it actively shrinks unexplained pay gaps, drastically reduces turnover among key populations, and dramatically boosts your offer acceptance rates because candidates actually trust you from day one. It makes the entire organization fairer and just, more coherent. I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought to take back to your own teams. The culture has completely changed. The laws have changed. The transparency shift, it's already happened all around us. So the only real question left is your organization truly ready for radical transparency?